I must also say I was also particularly kind of curious, let's say, or thinking about one person on the jury, and that was Martha Argerich. The lucky thing that I've had was that actually I had already met her two and a half years before when she was judging the Bösendorfer and Yamaha USASU piano competition. And there I had won, and she had really, really liked me there for some whatever reason. And so actually one of the things that I was thinking about, I was like, will Martha still like me? And then I remember even asking my professor, Zhang Zhensun, I was like, do you think Martha would still like me?
This is the legend of a man named Tony. Born in Chongqing, China, Tony was immersed into a rich cultural world. These experiences prepared him well for his venture into the world of piano. As he grew up in Toronto, Canada, he would begin piano lessons at 5 years old. But it quickly became clear that Tony was no ordinary pianist. At an extremely young age, he would begin studying at the Juilliard pre-college under Julian Martin, and in his adolescence, he would then study at the Phil and Eli Taylor Performance Academy, which is known today as the Taylor Academy in the Royal Conservatory of Music under James Anagnason. He became a force to be reckoned with. Tony was happy. And then one day, Tony decided to embark on the road to Warsaw. And this road would change his life forever. In 2014, at 15 years old, Tony competed in the Canadian Chopin Competition. And after each difficult round, Tony would win second prize and the Best Mazurka Performance Award. But that was not his final form. In 2015, at 16 years old, Tony competed at the Olympics of Piano, the International Chopin Competition. After 3 of the most competitive rounds of his career, Tony would reach the grand finals. Tony would perform his heart out, and eventually, it all worked out. At 16 years old, Tony would win 5th prize at the 2015 International Chopin Competition, and he would become the youngest prize winner in the history of the International Chopin Competition. But that still was not his final form either. Tony also competed at the US Open of Piano, the 2017 Van Cliburn International Piano Competition, and he would win a jury discretionary award at the Van Cliburn. This is all in addition to a second prize win at the 2012 Gina Bachauer International Junior Piano Competition, first prize at the 2013 Bösendorfer and Yamaha USASU International Junior Piano Competition, third prize at the 2013 Hilton Head International Piano Competition, and first prize at the 2014 Thomas and Yvonne Cooper International Competition. Tony achieved all of this before he went to Harvard. That's right. After all of this, Tony pursued and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics at Harvard University, all while balancing his piano performing career around the world and while running his own school of music, the Yike Academy of Music. Tony's power level is over 9,000. For his entire life, he has told the musical stories of great composers. But now, as we re-examine Tony's successful road to Warsaw, it is time to tell his story, his adventures, his legend. This is the legend of Tony Yike Yang. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for such a flattering introduction. I don't know how I can follow up after that. Yeah, no, I love your narration. Really, it's wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. So let's go all the way back to the very, very beginning. What inspired you to pursue piano?
Oh, well, after that introduction, I feel like I've been walking down memory lane already. And yeah, as for my first memories with music, I think for me it was a quite a natural, transition into studying the piano. And the word I use, why I use the word transition is because my mom is a piano teacher, and so she was the one who started me off. So when I was young, there was always kind of music around the house, and yeah, I loved music. I think from a very young age, and so when I was around 4.5, 5 years old, my mom decided to finally, teach me some basics. And so yeah, that's how I began.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a similar story to mine as well. I've told this too many times to count now on my own podcast. My mom was also a piano teacher and
Oh
was my
wow.
piano teacher too. So basically the same experience there.
Yeah, so yeah, it's I think it's also a very Asian household thing to have the kids as studying an instrument. So what better than having a teacher in your house
Exactly. Yeah.
at all times.
And I always say this as well. Like, I mean, Canadians are to hockey as Asians are to piano or music in general, right? So it's almost
Yeah,
like that,
it's the
almost,
truth.
right? So,
It's the truth. Yeah.
so aside from your mom, growing up, who and what were your early music influences?
Oh, this. How would I answer this? I mean, to be honest, when I was very, very young, I think I really liked music, but never thought of, becoming anything even remotely close to a musician as, my career. And so in that kind of sense, you know, um, I'm not really sure if there was someone who really stuck into my mind as, someone extremely inspirational. Of course, in a Chinese household, you hear of the names Lang Lang and Yundi, but I'd actually never watched them perform until much later on in my life, and that's even online. I would say, honestly, the music itself was really for me just so beautiful, to hear Furley's, to hear Turkish March, to hear Moonlight, to hear, I don't know, even these gavottes by Bach that, a lot of kids play, or the simple Chopin nocturnes, all of this quote unquote pop music, I think was for me just super, super wonderful. And it was just so beautiful. And the sound of the piano is just, I think that was one of the things that really stuck out to me, such a simple movement for such a, rewarding sound. I would say that's probably what kind of got me started. And then I would say probably inspirations came a little later on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good to hear. And you mentioned how I'm glad you mentioned how such a beautiful sound can come from the piano itself and can have such a profound effect. I think that's what many people, even those who don't pursue music or who aren't musicians, I think that's why many people are so drawn to the piano overall as a whole, right? It's that the sound, it can say so much in so little in that
Oh,
sort of tone.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It is the most complete instrument, out there, with the bass. I'm looking at the piano behind you for inspiration. The bass, the treble, and everything juicy in between, So it's really, and for beginners, it's really wonderful. I know, if you start playing the violin or if you start playing the cello, the first 5 years is is not really pleasant. But then for piano, it's really the curve at the beginning is really, really friendly. And so, it's, I think for me, and you get to sit down, right? So yeah, that's all pluses.
Yeah, exactly. I never played violin, but my cousin Kirsten Young did play violin and is now performing well in the world as
Of
well.
course. Oh wow. Well, I didn't know that connection. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, I mean, at
Yeah.
the time of this recording, it's just around the Christmas holidays. So I might have to ask him about his experiences. Or I think I actually did ask him actually on his episode, I think a number of years ago when he was playing early on with, with his early violin teachers at the time. But, I was there even hearing him when he was, I think it was after he won Menuhin in
Mm.
2010. Yeah, you can tell he's just something else. His tone is just something else. I think for him it's probably a rarity in that, but yeah, that violin
Oh,
part,
absolutely.
I guess, yeah, I think it's Because I mean, violin is a lot more. You have to listen to that tone, right? You don't have keys like a piano. You have to really tune it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I guess we can be very picky with tone, but I would say for the piano, I don't think there is necessarily it's very difficult to get a bad tone, I think, on the piano. Like it won't be a beautiful tone maybe, but it's difficult to get a very nasty tone. But for the violin, oh, that is so easy. So yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's so
absolutely.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I also actually I dabbled a little bit at the violin during my late elementary into my early high school years. Yeah,
Yeah.
horrible, horrible for
Yeah.
me. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, no, but I mean it's a
yeah.
different pursuit as well at the same time, but it's no, like each instrument has their own quirks
Oh,
and
absolutely. Yeah,
uniqueness to it, right?
yeah, for
So
sure.
returning
Very
to your experiences though, still early on, still at well, after starting piano at 5 years old, you then studied at the Juilliard pre-college. What was that experience like for you?
so. I think so. I did Juilliard pre college actually way later. So I was actually at Phil and Ellie Taylor quite a bit earlier, and
Okay.
so yeah, so Juilliard came when I was 14, 15. Taylor Academy came was when I was, I think, between 9 or 10 up until 14, 14-ish. So, um, and yeah, so I mean, both were just wonderful, wonderful experiences. And I'm so glad that programs like this exist because they really, first of all, give you the environment to not only study music, but to really kind of have a glimpse of what the musical lifestyle is like. And of course, these places have some of the most inspiring people, not only, the teachers, but the fellow students and just the energy is just so wonderful. And so I would say, I guess we'll probably cover this later on, but of course, there are many things that are very different about Toronto and New York, but yeah, both I think were just so motivating in that way that you're just surrounded by such great talent all over the place, and if you it's easy to fall behind, if you are not on your best behavior, let's say. So
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something, and I've mentioned this a couple of times. I missed that
mm,
in my experience when I was learning piano as well, because for most of my career, I was learning with my mom. It
mm,
wasn't until I was actually trying to pursue performance. This would have been around early high school at that point, so
mm,
like 13, 14 at that point. That was when I was then I had another teacher in Toronto, but
mm,
even then it was just very isolating because it was just myself, a teacher,
mm,
and that's it. There I didn't have
mm,
other students to kind of bounce off ideas off of. Maybe in theory class, but even then, that was basically what people that were at the time I was taking. I think history one, history two. I don't know
mm,
what designation it is now, but at the time, history one, history
mm,
two, and I'd be the
mm,
one 13 or 14-year-old in the class, and everybody's already what, like 17, 18, and a
mm,
number of years. I mean, nowadays that age gap is nothing now, but back then
mm.
when you're a kid, that's a huge age difference. Your experiences are different.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
so so for me, I didn't have that kind of community
Yeah.
experience,
Mm,
and at the time of this recording, I recently had Victoria Wong on an episode, and she went to Taylor as well, and she told
yeah.
me the same thing. Like the community was just there, right? It was a small community,
Mm,
but everybody knew each other, and people shared their love of music together. I didn't get that.
yeah, for sure. I would say definitely the community is the biggest thing. I mean, especially at both these institutions, they're so active in just trying to, have the students come together. There's like, these academy showcase concerts all the time, master classes all the time, studio classes. And then the fact that you're doing theory, musicianship, ear training, history, and, blah, blah, blah. So there were so many points that, we shared. And, it kind of, music is all about connectedness and just the fact that, we were always kind of together on weekends and sharing this kind of thing. Yeah, it really kind of laid the, I would say, the groundwork for later on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That connectedness is what define a lot of the experiences in your case, and also Victoria's case, and also many of the musicians that I've had also previously. Even Ilya Ovcharenko, the 2022 first prize Honens winner,
Yeah.
he was born and raised in Ukraine, and he studied in Ukraine. Similar deal at the Lyceum as
Mm.
well. It's all community there at that point.
Yeah.
And with the experiences at the Juilliard Pre-College and at Taylor Academy, what are the similarities and differences between both of these experiences?
Well, I think I'm not the best fit for answering this from a very unbiased point of view because even when I was attending Juilliard, I didn't live in New York. I was making the weekend commute, and so therefore I wasn't as integrated in the environment at Juilliard as I was in Toronto. So one of the biggest differences from my personal experience was I felt that there was more connection in Toronto, but that's of course because of my circumstances. Um, I don't know. I think Juilliard perhaps, but maybe also from an objective point of view, I do think that Juilliard is, let's say, relatively speaking, a slightly more mature institution, and that does carry with it more prestige. And sometimes with that prestige comes with, I don't want to say carelessness, but then there is like it's a system. It's a well run system. When I was part of the Taylor Academy, actually, it was not even called the Taylor Academy when Victoria and I first started. It was called YAPA, Young Artist Performance Academy, and so the Taylors hadn't come into the picture until a little later on, with their massive donation. But yeah, and I think at that point, Yappa was still a rather new concept. I have no idea what it's like now, but I think one of the big things that the Taylor Academy focused on was, trying to actually have master classes every week or every other week. And so in that sense, I think because, it was a newer institution, I think, there was a greater emphasis or effort on trying to make this community. Whereas I think at Juilliard, everyone knows Juilliard and everyone in that sense trusts Juilliard. It felt a bit more indifferent, actually. That's from a social perspective. In terms of, I don't know, in terms of other things, some differences. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there was a little more diversity in the courses that were being offered at Juilliard to some degree, because I think actually in some ways I don't know about the Taylor Academy now, but back then in some ways the theory courses and the history courses and whatnot, it felt somehow a little binded by the RCM exam system. So all of the things were named, history 1, history 2, history 3. Whereas when I went to Juilliard, there was, a conducting class, which didn't exist during my time. There was, kind of jazz theory. There were, I guess a little more variance on the theme. But I think on the other hand, it was a little less personal. So that's probably my most honest answer on the differences. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to the social aspect of it as well, the differences there. But no, it's good to hear that. I mean, you really enjoyed both, but it's also at being at Taylor, it's good to hear that even before it was called Taylor and all the way up until when you moved on from Taylor. I think it's good that there's that sense of not just community, but also the sense of trying to preserve something and trying to build something that's really at the time sort of kind of groundbreaking, basically, in terms of the music program at the time.
And I mean, one of the really great things about the Taylor Academy that, I think that also helped with the community building were the concerts at Kerner, which of course still happen. And, there's these $10 rush tickets, which, which are just the most wonderful gifts ever. And the thing at Juilliard, of course, there was a lot of concerts going on, but it wasn't so. Maybe because there was too many concerts going on in New York. It's like hard to make an event out of it. Whereas, like for example, in Toronto, we had if we had Trifonov coming, or if we had Katya coming, or etc. Everyone would kind of go to that singular event. Whereas I guess in New York there was not so much of this culture of, our eyes are staring at the series at Alice Tully or at Carnegie, whereas like everyone was in different places at the same at different times. And as a kid, when you're first being introduced to this world, in that sense, you don't even know where to look. Whereas in Toronto, it felt much more like more in that sense, more incorporated. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
No, you're making a lot of sense. You're making sense. Don't worry. This is actually really, this is this is actually really similar to, and this is going way back, and also in my own podcast as well. When I had Scott Russell, and this is actually in the sports world. So Scott Russell was the former host of CBC Olympics. So he's hosted many of the last, I want to say 10 or 15 or 20 years of Olympics, with the exception of the Vancouver 2010 and the London 2012 Olympics. He had a similar point in sports, because back in the 80s and the 90s, in Canada at least, everybody knew Hockey Night in Canada. That's the big one. And at the time, internet was still, the World Wide Web didn't exist until the 90s at that point. And even when it did exist, we didn't really have video streaming until the late 2000s. So back in the 80s and the 90s, and even before that, everybody tuned into Hockey Night in Canada. Everybody tuned into that. Nowadays, you have so many different ways of watching and listening to sports and creating content off of that as well, that now it's really difficult to make an event, a big event, out of even sports events nowadays, even if it is a major NHL game or a major NBA game or whatever sports that you're watching, right? Now, luckily for the World Cup of soccer and for the Olympics, they still have that kind of, but even then, they've also because of unrelated issues, they've lost that sort of allure, right? But it's a similar issue. It's that there's so many things, there's too much choice, right? And people are just like, well, which one do I go to? It's like, and I think there's even psychological studies on this as well, where when too much choice, sometimes they don't even end up choosing anything. It's just like, whatever, right? So.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, I'm so glad that I was in Toronto first and in New York second, because like in Toronto, because when you have so much options, it's also so easy to get lost. So whereas, I think in Toronto, where things are a little more, systematic, and it was, a little more kind of like focused in that energy, New York is, I guess, for a more, in my opinion, slightly more, mature kind of person, where, you kind of, maybe know what you want first, before you. Otherwise, it's just so easy to get lost, and I think you do need that focus at some point, and so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really the big city feel, and I think Toronto, maybe it's changed from when you were there, but Toronto sort of has that kind of similar issue now. I think when a city or a metropolis of any kind gets to a certain size, people start feeling a lot less connected to it at that point, right?
Yeah.
And I was just at the Elora Festival earlier on in 2025. This would have been in July, to watch Janina Filkowska perform, right? And Elora, as you may know, Elora Fergus they're basically two towns kind of bunched together. But
I actually don't know, so please enlighten me.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
So yeah, Elora and Fergus, I think they're separate towns. I think in its own county. I'm not too familiar with that county in particular, but I am familiar with the fact that it's nowhere close to even Mississauga's population. It's probably not even as large as even. It's probably even smaller than Georgetown. I could be off on this point, but
where is this? Can I search it up? I'm just so curious.
It is. It is just 15 minutes west of Guelph. It's a
Wow.
smaller town, basically, right? It's a smaller town, and I don't want to say that there's not much going on, but it's just that there's not necessarily like Toronto. It's not Toronto, right?
Mm,
There are events happening, and people know about these events. And
mm,
at least from my own experience, again, could be wrong on this point because I don't live in Elora, but from my experience, there's a general sense of community there because there's just fewer people there,
yeah,
right?
for
There's an
sure.
identity in that
Yeah.
town. Whereas now Toronto, it does have its identity, but because it's so big now, and it's not even it's not even the big that big of a city too. I mean, New York's even larger than that, right?
No, for sure.
But
Yeah.
even for Toronto, because it's reached that extent, now people feel very disconnected from the community overall, right? They kind of just bunch up in their
No.
own small little tribes or their small little in groups.
No.
So
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
changed, unfortunately, in that sense. But that's why we need music events and cultures and arts and culture. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be a connoisseur of the the nuances of every part of music, but just being there, just being in that vicinity, just experiencing that art, I think is so important, right? But again, I think
Yeah.
things have really gotten complicated over the years.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Life has changed so much in the past 5, 10 years, from every,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
absolutely.
So, to sum up your early life, your early experiences from your time studying with Julian Martin and James Anagnuson, what are the most important lessons that you learned early on?
Oh, yeah. I think I was thinking about this question. I think two things come to mind. Number one, music is composed of three components: rhythm, melody, and harmony, and in that order. And so I think from a young age, I was drilled with the fact that pulse is so important and that oftentimes it is so underrated. But pulse is so important in music making. And, not to do too much or to do too little with the pulse, but, just to have things be as natural as possible. And then number two, also, yeah, I think I grew up with quite instinctual education, and especially James and Agnes, and he has really some of the best musical instincts that I know. And yeah, in that sense, I think from a young age, I was approaching music learning from kind of course, studying the intellectual parts and studying structure and etc. But I think at the end, regardless of what you do, regardless of how amazingly filled your brain is with this and that, it has to feel right. And I think these two things are things that I have always kept on to, or two things that always keep me grounded. Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to what you were talking about rhythm, melody, and harmony, and in that particular order, this brings up a point that one of my earlier guests, Aaron Sang, who teaches music composition at the University of Toronto's Faculty of
Mm.
Music, he speaks about how it's about the gaps in between the notes. Right?
Mm.
And
Oh,
that
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, and that gap can determine so much. Like even that silence, and even in speaking too, in public speaking, in my own experience, and also the experiences of fellow lawyers as well, it's that emphasis. It's the silence can speak so much. It can be the loudest thing that you can
Oh,
say.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, if we just think about just evolution, rhythm came first. You know, yeah, and rhythm is our heart is rhythm. Everything there's rhythm, and honestly, actually nowadays when I look at this phrase again, when I look at this order, honestly, sometimes I would like to even switch harmony and melody. I think harmony can really, if you take a look at Schubert, he can write the same note, but it sounds just the most amazing thing because of his whatever he does underneath. And I think that oftentimes, but this goes into something a bit more wide ranging. But I think in general, the aesthetics of this day and age, the piano playing or in general music making, is very much top focused. And yeah, so in actually in many ways, I think that harmony even is yeah, but yeah, for sure, rhythm is just really just so human.
Yeah, very, very much. Even the harmony. I think it's even in competitions, even for Chopin, even without looking at the Chopin competition, but both at the competition and outside of it, when you just hear a really good performance of any of his pieces, of course the melody is there, right? The rhythm's there, but even the harmony, what they're saying in that in the counter melodies and
Oh,
the different lines that are there, when you hear it differently, it's just oh man, it's just it hits differently, you know.
oh, for sure, and definitely everything that's happening in the harmonies, it shapes the melody, and um, so yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And as we begin to embark back on your road to Warsaw, what inspires you to embark on this road?
Oh goodness. I get asked this question, of course, a lot of the times, but I feel like each time my answer is very different. I mean, in a way, I think for any pianist, this is, I guess, the thing to do. This is the thing to experience. And it is by and in itself, even let's put Chopin's music away, but of course this competition wouldn't be as great as it is without Chopin's music. I think the fact that everyone is playing Chopin's music is also what gives this, competition its magic and its sorcery. Um, but it's just such an event. I mean, just look at the way it's done. Look at the way it's streamed. Look at the way that the competitors are, being pampered off the stage and also on the stage with just such amazing instruments, with such amazing acoustics, with such a blessed jury. And yeah, so in that sense, it's such like an event to look forward to, even just as a human life experience. And so that's one point. Of course, Chopin's music, and for me, I would say my interest with the competition really, really developed after the 2010 competition, and I followed that competition with such interest. And I, honestly speaking, I still think that it is the gold standard for the Chopin competition in recent history. I really think the winners of that year are just all of them magnificent and each in their own very, very different ways. And so just the pure artistry that we witnessed in that competition was so life changing for me. And knew that's when I felt, aside from all the hype, that this competition was the real deal. And
Yeah,
then, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah. But of course, also it's so interesting. Of course, because Chopin is such a human composer, and in many ways, Chopin is a very strict composer. But there's also so many liberties in terms of the general aesthetic you go for in Chopin, and it's always interesting to compare and to contrast. So yeah, just all of these things, and just the significance of that stage, the beautiful music, yeah, Poland, and just yeah, it's the thing to do, I guess.
I mean, there's a reason why we call it the Olympics of piano, right? Well, I mean, unofficially. So, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah. No, 2010 is a year. Yeah, I think I fully agree with how 2010 was just such a strong year. I don't know if it was necessarily like the only gold standard for me. I think with every time that they've held it, I think they've just gotten better and better and better. But I think it's still like I think it was the moment when the Chopin competition really defined itself as whoa, this is the, like you said, the thing to do.
Mm,
And that year, yeah, totally agreed. How even aside from Juliana Avdieva winning first and having a great career of her own,
mm,
even looking at other people other there in that year alone was unbelievable. I think Danil Trifonov was also a prize winner that year as well.
Oh
I think he was
yeah,
third. Yeah.
that year was just. I mean, honestly speaking, that year, I guess it really was just such a special year with. I mean, yeah, Trifonov, Kenushas, Bojanov, Wunder, and honestly speaking, maybe of course of course there's new, I guess, developments in interpretation and in aesthetics, but I personally feel that even within the more recent editions, including even my edition of the competition, that some of the kinds of playing that people are going after are coming from 2010 roots, if that makes sense. Like it was kind of like some amazing, and there was even I remember I was preparing for the competition in 2015, and one of the pieces that I actually had really wanted to play was the Rondo a la Mazur, Opus 5, F major. My mentor at the time, my teacher at the time, Dang Tae-son, was like, "No, you cannot play it." And I was like, "Why? It's such a beautiful piece." And he was like, "No, because Bojanov played it way too well that everyone still remembers it, and yeah, you just cannot play it in this competition." And indeed, like almost no one played it in our year because Bojanov just played it so well. And then of course, we heard it several times in 20. Actually, one person did play it in 2015. But his program was actually more or less the exact same as Bojanov's, and this participant also made it to the finals. And then later on in 2021, we heard it a few more times. But honestly, the interpretation, the kind of aesthetic it's going for, it's very similar to this, of course, in a different way. People play it in their own way, but the aesthetic, yeah, it comes from Bojanov, and we see this not only with Rondo a la Mazur, but also in other things with other of the winners of 2010. And so that's my personal opinion and observation. Yes,
that's a lot of what, like you said, what we hear nowadays derives much from 2010. For me, when I was looking at it, I was looking at it from that perspective as well, but also from a production standpoint as well. And for me,
yes, yeah, for sure.
This is my broadcaster, my sports announcer side kind of coming out at this point. It's like I'm looking at the production, and that's what I'm saying. 2010 was really the year when it really looked. I mean, if you were to look at the 2010 performance now from a production standpoint, you probably couldn't tell it apart from now, with the only exception that the lighting was, I think, purple back in 2010 on the main stage. But yeah, no, like that like from that standpoint too, even from a production standpoint, from TV broadcast to the coverage, and then live streaming coming onto the scene. Early live stream, I think, was 2015, but even then it was just very, very, very early on. It wasn't until 2021 when we really saw live streaming take effect and to what we saw in this day and age. I think from that perspective, I think it really started from 2010 and just got better and better and better and better and better.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, set the standard, both the Institute, and it's just what a wonderful year that year was also for Chopin piano playing. So for me, that was really a turning point also in my relationship with the competition. And yeah, I still am so inspired by many performances, of course, but those performances in particular.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, you and I both know Leonard Gilbert. That was the
year. Yeah, he was also part of that year. Yeah. What a year. What a year, really. Yeah. What a
Going back to your path though, before you got there though, you first had to go to the 2014 Canadian Chopin competition. What was the preparation for that competition like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, of course, I would say that it was quite intense because also I think it was my first time doing an adult, competition. And of course, knowing that this is a competition that precedes Warsaw, kind of the vibe or the feeling for it is different from all the other competitions that I had done before. But of course, I still, tried to do my very, very best. And, I didn't really look at it differently. And of course, because of also my age, it's not like I was expecting much. And so in that sense, I feel so grateful to have been so young at that time. And so I just, of course, there was a lot of repertoire. And I just, try to get into each piece and each style of piece as best as I could, focusing on characterization and all that. And playing for teachers, running through. Probably, I would say, I mean, in terms of the feeling, it was definitely different than when I did some of the other junior competitions. But in terms of preparation, I would say it's more or less the same. And the thing with Chopin, is I always get, especially for the Warsaw competition, I always get asked, "Oh, how long did you prepare for the Chopin competition?" And I'm like, probably, just from like a few years after, you start playing the piano, because you get exposed to Chopin's music very early on. And to be honest, that's already when the preparation begins. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny how you mentioned the preparation part, and it's great. The really, in a way, everybody starts preparing for the Chopin competition a couple of years after they start playing piano, right? In that way.
And especially even more this, nowadays, you see so many young people competing, and you like I've been also teaching a lot of master classes, especially in Asia, but also in other places. And then you see these, I don't know, like 8-year-olds. They're like, "Oh, I'll be doing Chopin competition in 10 years." I'm like, "Okay, great to know you're already preparing now." Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
mean, it goes back to what we were saying. This is our Olympics, right? This is our Olympics, or this is our NHL for hockey fans as well, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure. It's
it's
definitely a big rite of passage. Yeah.
exactly, it's a rite of passage, and the
Yeah.
difference with this one is that if you win any prize in this one, you basically have a career that's pretty much almost set for you for the next however many years, basically, because of just how recognizable but also how high caliber the standards are at this competition as well. So very much is a rite of passage, and something that more now, especially more kids who are seriously considering this path are now considering to do.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Take us through each round of the Canadian Chopin competition, all the way to the finals and to your second prize win. What do you remember from that experience?
Goodness, now you're really testing me, because I have to remember if it's. Yeah, I must say I actually, because probably because I've also judged some Chopin competitions since, and then I've been seriously, the Chopin competition even nowadays is so, the repertoire is different. Now with the six preludes, they brought back the six preludes from decades ago. Yeah, with all these kind of variations of Chopin competitions, I'm actually even forgetting what exactly I played in the first round. I think it was probably a variation of the preliminary round, whereas for sure the second round had the sonata. Yeah, I remember it was held at the John Paul Cultural Center, which I actually had played at before, because I was doing the junior version of the Canadian Chopin competition back when Mr. Gilbert won in 2010. And so I had played there before. So in that sense, it was kind of like, oh, I'd known this place already. The good memories, as well as the maybe not so good memories sometimes came back when I was when I was playing. Yeah, I remember. I think I remember very clearly the final round where I played the mazurkas, and then the E minor concerto with string quintet, I believe. And that was the very first time I had played a concerto with a string quintet, which was so interesting. You have, of course, the strings, which is so much, just 1,000 times more beautiful than the second piano accompaniment. Um, and yeah, for me that was really interesting, because also I had played at least the first movement with orchestra before, but it didn't, of course, a string quintet can have the thickness of an orchestra, so that kind of in between kind of feeling was very, yeah, memorable to me. And yeah, I yeah, it was a very interesting time. And then one of the key moments that I remember, actually, this is probably actually the moment that I remember the best. It was after the competition, and I think the top three prize winners, they get masterclass opportunity with KJ, with Krzysztof Jablonski. Our year, it was held at the Polish consulate, I think. And yeah, there I played some things like fantasy. Yeah, very, very eye-opening. And I think it really, yeah, definitely his few points there really also helped me prepare for Warsaw. Yeah.
Yeah. Krzysztof was also the chair of the 2025 Canadian Chopin competition.
Yeah, I think he's there every year, no? Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
I
always,
believe so.
yeah.
I think since your time, I think since your day, he was there for each and every single edition.
Mm.
So no, good to see that even back then there was already that sort of influence. Actually, it's
Yeah.
funny. It's a funny story actually at the John Paul Cultural Center. That's actually not far from where my high school was actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays I have been seeing. I wouldn't say I've been following the Canadian Chopin, but I've seen the videos and the photos later. Yeah, back then we did not have our winners. I don't even know if we had a winners concert, to be honest, but we definitely did not have it at Kerner. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a big change between then and now. But yeah, it was a wonderful time, and it was just so much support from the Canadian Chopin Society, and it really, to do the preliminary round, kind of under their financial support was something that really made my whole journey possible. And yeah, when I participated in the preliminary round of Warsaw, just 6 months later, yeah, it was my first ever trip to Europe. So just
Yeah.
that entire year, in a way, it was so memorable. But it all passed by so quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, no, the past, just the most recent 2025 Canadian Chopin competition. Yeah, a lot of
Mm,
things have really much grown. Me
mm.
myself being one of the co-organizers of that competition.
Wow. Nice.
So
Very
so yeah, so I kind of have some insider access. I mean, with that part, but I mean, some insider access. I mean, I'm
The
joking. I'm
scoring
playing.
sheets. The scoring sheets.
No, I don't have that. No. And full disclaimer, I don't want to get in trouble with the society. Okay, so no,
You're
no,
blushing.
no. But I mean, yeah. So I was one of the co-organizers of the competition just most recently, and also actually, if you watch back on some of the live streams, I was also one of the MCs as well. So you
Oh, wow.
seen there, it's a very, very amazing. I myself have been very grateful and thankful for that opportunity as well. It's been
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
so much fun, even just from the organizational standpoint. It's also educational as well for me, just learning how to run a competition,
Mm,
because I hadn't done that before. I mean,
mm,
I hadn't done anything like that in a music competition. Like, I've done a lot of promotions from a communication standpoint,
mm,
from just myself being in the sports world and broadcasting, but from, even though luckily I was also a pianist who almost competed at this competition. We were just talking before we started recording. I almost competed in the same year that you did in 2014,
mm,
actually. But luckily I had that sort of knowledge of the importance of it, and for me
mm,
also it's personally important as well, for just how much Chopin means to me too.
mm. Yeah.
But even with all this, there was still so much I had to learn. I'm the new guy there.
Yeah.
I still am, but I'm very much the new guy, and having learned so much from
Mm.
even just running it and hosting it. And honestly, all the credit has to go to Janet Lipinski.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. I
From
mean,
building this from scratch, really just,
yeah.
yeah.
And
No, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say just one more thing. Yeah, and really this competition, even though it was 3 rounds, but just the fact that there were some people who are usually sometimes sitting in Warsaw, being there, and just the general flow of having the semifinals have a sonata, and then there being a concerto in the finals. It really did help make, because Warsaw is such a great undertaking. It really did help kind of ease the flow into getting used to that Warsaw. I mean, of course, it's still a very, very different thing, but it definitely it helps a great deal. And to have the audience just full of Chopin lovers, and you know, and
Yeah. No, yeah, and especially even just being at Kerner as a whole, being at an actual world class concert hall is a huge, huge difference when it comes to even just being accustomed to it. Because,
No.
I mean, even in Athena Deng's experience, she told me that actually Kerner Hall felt larger than the Warsaw Philharmonia for her, at least.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, so in that way, it was also good, even from just a mental, intellectual perspective from that part, right? And to finish my point, what I was saying earlier on is really all the credit has to go to Janet Lipinski, who is the president of the Canadian Chopin Society, and also to the other co-organizers as well, because they're the ones who really put forward. Konrad Svirchek also is
Yeah.
a legend, honestly. Like the live stream, for those of you who watched the live stream, Konrad Svirchek is the guy to thank for that one.
Yeah, I was going to ask because he was doing it in 2015, but it's wonderful to know that he's still very, very much involved. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah,
He is
yeah,
really the guy. Yeah. They are
yeah.
just such a power family, just doing so much for Chopin in Canada, and just I mean, yeah, really wonderful.
Exactly. So really, all the credit has to go to them. I'm just a guy with a big mouth. That's it. You know.
Oh well, every member is important. It takes a village. It really takes a village.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So again, all the credit goes to them. For you though, going to 2015 and at the International Chopin Competition, you mentioned briefly about the prelims as well, and
Mm.
going to the main rounds eventually. What was the preparation process like for that competition?
Oh well, well. Yeah, very intense, very intense. Uh, yeah, and actually, here was actually where I also wanted to say a little bit more about the Canadian Chopin Society, and especially Janet, because she was actually there for both the preliminaries and for the actual competition to, support us. And to have her there really meant everything, really. To have that kind of, just her presence, there was just so, well, meant so much. And of course, she has attended the competitions before. And so a lot of it was kind of hearing about, the experiences as a, even attendee, what it's like at the Chopin competition, etc. So those were like kind of like the firsthand experiences that really helped prepare not only me but also, but I would say also probably for Victoria and for Alex, when we were doing the prelims. But yeah, I mean, it's the biggest thing in the world. So this competition, at least for for young pianists, at least. So I probably, I probably, I would say in that sense, it also for me took quite a lot of pressure off, because who am I to expect anything? And even like, let's say even now, like, let's say if like if I'm 26 and if I did the competition when I was 26 without the previous experience, even then, it's competitions are such a gamble, but especially this one, so just really doing the best that I could. I tried to play the repertoire as much as I could. um I played it for Julian Martin, I played it for Dang Tae-sun, and then yeah, just went and heads down, and yeah, was just surrendered myself to the preparation process, and then yeah, didn't expect anything, and yeah, just took it from there.
Yeah, yeah. And when you were preparing for that competition, and when eventually you ended up selecting your piano for that competition, you picked the Yamaha for the 2015.
Yeah, I even in the preliminary, I think there is a piano selection. So in the preliminary, I also chose Yamaha, and then for the actual one, yeah, I also chose Yamaha. Yeah, for me, the Yamaha at that time, I mean, I still really love Yamahas because they're so clear and they are just so easy to play. They're so reliable. They're easy to control. But for me at the time, that was the number one thing, just to find a piano that I could play the easiest. But honestly speaking, that particular Yamaha in the 2015 competition, and also I would say probably 2010 because of the successes that we saw in 2010 with Yamaha, it was such a colorful instrument. And in the Warsaw fill, which is quite a wet hull, to be honest, the clarity of that Yamaha really, really made it easier for me, to play.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking about the Warsaw Philharmonia, take us back to that stage. The MC announces your name and program. You walk up to the stairs to the stage. You see the audience, you bow, you sit down, you play. What were you feeling and thinking in each moment?
Yeah. So of course, always I think the first stage is the most nerve wracking because you have such a short time. It's your first impression, and first impressions are really, how important they are, even, yeah, this was something that I had experienced before. So I think I was just, my heart was just rushing, and also I must also say I was also particularly kind of curious, let's say, or thinking about one person on the jury, and that was Martha Argerich. And of course, she is such a legend, and of course, the Chopin competition jury. I think without her, these years has been, people talk about it. But luckily, she was still, doing the Chopin competition jury in my year. But the lucky thing that I've had was that actually I had already met her two and a half years before when she was judging the Busendorfer and Yamaha USASU piano competition. And there I had won, and she had really, really liked me there for some whatever reason. And so actually one of the things that I was thinking about, I was like, will Martha still like me? And then I remember even asking my professor, Deng Daesun, I was like, do you think Martha would still like me? And to be honest, this was one of the last things I was thinking of before I went on stage. Yeah, I have to put it out there. Of course, I was thinking about the notes. I was thinking about the Nocturne. I played the Opus 27 number 1. I was thinking about, of course, as any kind of nervous person, I was thinking about where I could potentially forget the left hand, and then in the 25 number 11 where I could potentially miss an arpeggio on my thumb somewhere. And I was going through all the bad scenarios, actually, maybe a very unhealthy, but I couldn't control it because it was really I was just so nervous and I didn't want to make a bad impression. And of course, even though I said earlier, I didn't have any expectations, still I managed to get it this far. So I don't want to, right? and so all these thoughts were happening at the same time. But then of course I had to go, and so I went on stage, and I think, let me think. I think actually at the time, I'm not even sure actually, because for the preliminaries, I was wearing some shoes that had a soft sole, because back then at the time I had a stomping the pedal problem, so I was making a lot of noises with the foot. I think also during the first, I'm not sure if it was if I was still wearing those soft sole shoes in the actual competition. But anyways, one of the things, the biggest things that actually I had really only experienced that one time in my life was that when I was walking up those stairs, my legs were shaking. My legs were shaking. And then I went on stage, but I do this all the time, actually, even not only actually at Chopin, but when I bow, I tend to close my eyes, or I try to just not focus on anything, to not see anything. So because one of the most, I guess, daunting things, honestly, to play in that hall is when you bow and when you look in that, kind of direction, when you look in front of you, you see the two rows of jury members, and that's very, very daunting. And of course, I didn't want to see two people in particular, Martha and Deng Daesun. So I just try to cover my eyes, and and then when I was playing through the nocturne, I was my both my feet were just shaking like crazy, really, and yeah, I was just trying to control the piano, to not have it be so sharp, because I guess that is one of the things that you worry about in a Yamaha, is that the sound can sometimes get a bit too sharp, and but I think later on, I think when I got into the molto agitato section, and I hit those first few leaps. Okay, in the left hand, and then I think my foot stopped.
Wow.
Both my feet.
That's a very, very detailed look into your experiences, even just in noticing, does Martha like me, kind of thing. That's a
Honestly,
good way.
to be honest, that is not. I'm not the only person that thinks that, and there's a lot of people who think that. Whether or not they like to admit it, but yeah, I think it was just because I met her before, and of course she is just such a legend, and I mean she is simply one of the greatest, if not the greatest, alive, and to have her listen to your playing is just like it's not something to take for. Of course, all the jury members, but especially Martha. I mean, yeah, that particular day I remember very, very vividly. It was, yes, October 7th, and I think my time was like 1 o'clock or 1:25, the last one before the lunch break. Yeah, it was. That was. Quite a day.
Yeah, it definitely was quite a day, and yeah, I mean, of course, Martha just has that recognition, and even just her playing is also very, very much very, very distinctive and very unique in so many different ways as well from her standpoint. I remember even watching when she was still judging, and one of the camera angles just shows it's from the left side of the piano showing up, so you see the audience and even showing the jury as well. And for a brief few seconds on camera, Martha Argerich, I don't know who she was looking at, but she was using binoculars to look at the hands. She was using binoculars to look at the hands.
I think I know. There's a few iconic moments of her judging. One of them is her, she's using binoculars to look at hands. And another one is like her foot dangling off the balcony. Yeah. Quite a character. Yeah, really just so free spirited, and of course, that's, I think, just the greatest thing also about her playing, just so free spirited, so colorful, so intrigued. She has so much interest, in the smallest things in life, and there's so much appreciation that goes into every little thing. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, take us back to that moment. You're sitting, or standing rather, in that crowd alongside Kate, Seongjin Cho, Eric, Charles, everybody else there, all the finalists bunched up. Take us back to that moment when your name was announced as the youngest prize winner in the history of the International Chopin Competition.
Oh, goodness. I don't think it was that dramatic. It was just fifth prize. They did not announce all of that. I mean, it was, to be honest, I was just so surprised I had made it into the finals. To be honest, we had booked our tickets for the second round, for the end of the second round. I thought I was going home after the second round, and before the competition, my teacher Deng Daison also thought I was going to go home after the second round, so he refused to listen to the third round or the finals. Like, he was just like, "Oh, we're just going to focus on rounds 1 or 2," and so it was really like I must say this because it's just like I just didn't expect to be there. I felt like such a clown, in my Adidas sweater. I was wearing a blue Adidas sweater. I'm like, I don't feel like I belong. Anyway, so I mean, to get the fifth prize is something. I don't even know. It's of course it's absolutely wonderful, but at the same time, I must say, probably because also I had already made it so far, and because my final round wasn't I didn't really expect to the finals. I really didn't prepare for the finals, and honestly, the day that I made the finals was both the most one of the most happiest and also one of the most stressful days of my life, because I realized that I still had to really finish learning the second and third movement. So my last few days of the competition were really like hell. So with that being said, I thought I played an okay first movement, but I didn't really feel comfortable at all in the second and third movements, and I had a lot of mistakes. So, of course, I was so grateful that I could end up with the fifth prize. But at the same time, as anyone, I think you were like, oh, if only I had prepared a bit more. I would have been, so there was also a little bit of that feeling as well. But of course, I cannot expect that much. But those are the honest. That's my very honest answer. But of course, it was just, honestly speaking, it's just like you feel numb in the moment. You just don't even know what's going on. There's like thousands of cameras in front of you. You see all the jury members standing in front of you, and there's no breathing space. And you've been there for like 2, 3, 5 hours. Not particularly there, but you've been in that kind of, and you've been kind of in this kind of like expectation phase where you feel like your destiny is being controlled by others, and you've been in this kind of thing for like 3 weeks, a month. And so it all kind of just goes by. I mean, they announce your name and you're smiling. And even if they don't announce your name, you have to smile because all the cameras are there. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, I think I was standing next to Eric and Kate because I'd known them the best. Eric and we had met before. And so I was just standing next to him. And then, yeah, of course, I bonded a little bit with Charles during the competition because we're both Canadian. And yeah, but also I think I was also very curious after I got fifth prize at who was going to be 4, 3, 2, 1. So I was like still just like, yeah, I was like thinking, oh, who was going to take it all, Sungjin or Charles or Kate, Yeah, but yeah. I mean, I had also, yeah, speaking of which, I did check out the competition a little bit. So during the competition, I had my personal favorites as well. So, yeah, so all of these thoughts mixed into one.
Yeah, I think the funniest part is that Deng Tai-son didn't really have much faith in you. That's like, you're not going to get into the finals. So
Oh,
he even listen to you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
but
man.
I mean, I later I earned this nickname from him, instant noodles. Because I get fast. I can, if this is a big if I put my together, I can get prepared very quickly. And so that's why he calls me instant noodles, because he was like, oh wow, you could play.
Oh man, that is hilarious.
Yeah.
What a nickname. Oh my goodness.
No,
Oh man.
yeah. Yeah.
That's hilarious. I mean, that's two things I'm going to remember. That and does Martha Argerich like you at the end of the day? Oh my goodness.
I don't know if I'm being too candid here, but anyways, these are just the yeah.
Yeah, no. Oh man. So aside from winning fifth prize, what were your favorite experiences in Warsaw, inside and outside the competition?
Oh, definitely eating food. Definitely the Vietnamese noodles. The Vietnamese noodles. Pho. Sorry, pho is so tasty in Warsaw because Warsaw has a very very big Vietnamese community, and so pho was really just wonderful. And so I always loved my pho. That was my favorite part of the day, especially because I had pho in the evenings, which means I didn't have to practice really much anymore after. So it was also kind of like, for me, it was like, oh, like it told my body clock that I can just relax and breathe before the next day. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed those. Honestly, the worst part, though, I can tell you so many of the worst parts. The worst part was definitely waiting for the results. I think I said this also actually in my interview 10 years ago, right after the competition. I remember this clearly. Just waiting. The waiting part is really awful. The waiting part is awful. But other things, yeah, definitely. I mean, playing in the hall is of course a unique, very, very unique experience. But and I would say I enjoyed it. I would say I enjoyed it. Yeah, I absolutely did enjoy it. I think my the favorite round that I enjoyed to play was definitely not the final round, but maybe the maybe the third stage I actually enjoyed playing the most. And then part of the first stage. Second stage, I think I was kind of a bit because I thought that was the round I was gonna get out. um yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a special. I mean, that hall is really very, very special. I mean, just because of the history and the so the kind of pretense that you walk into, the kind of expectation that you have of that space, and it really does live up to its expectation. Of course, it's special, to share Chopin's music there. Oh, yeah, I must also say, yeah, one of the another thing that I remember doing was I did visit the Holy Cross Museum a couple of times, which is of course where Chopin's heart is buried. And there, it's very, very interesting in that it's of course located in the middle of the city, where the city is absolutely bustling. And honestly, the competition, because of how much media coverage there is and because of how many interviews there are, both from within the institute and outside the institute, there's really not much space or privacy, to be honest. There's really not much. And you're always fighting for practice rooms, so you're always bumping into people and etc. Holy Cross Church was anything but that. You're in this city and there's a lot of people just running around, and you walk into Holy Cross Church and it's just yeah.
Yeah, the churches, especially ones with a lot of history, have that sort of calmness and peace to them.
Yeah,
That part.
so much needed. And of course, I must say, I was also there with my parents, and yeah, they're also, with parents there, it's also a lot of pressure, and so
Especially when you were 16 too. You're still a kid at the time, right? So
yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, Holy Cross Church, that was wonderful. Of course, because Chopin's heart is there, but also just it's such a beautiful church. Have you ever been?
No, actually, honestly, I
Very
want to make a trip
beautiful.
to Poland one day.
Oh, well, you
It's
definitely should. Yeah, it's so
yeah,
beautiful. Really, it's just
yeah.
yeah.
I've seen a lot of photos of
Really, because actually, I must say, in Warsaw, you really cannot avoid Chopin. You really cannot. I don't want to say avoid Chopin, but you can't avoid, let's say, the sound of Chopin in that, especially during the competition, because either people are talking about it, or you hear people practicing on it, or even on the streets. There's like these benches where you can press a button and they'll play you some Chopin's music. But actually, the surprising part is that the one of the only places where there's not really Chopin's music is actually in the church, unless when there's a concert. So if you want your dose of silence and if you want to breathe, yeah, really, that church was such a yeah.
yeah. But you can't escape Chopin anyways because even though his music isn't there, his heart literally is there,
Oh
right?
yeah, but
So
that's wonderful. But I honestly think that Chopin's music really does silence, breathing. It's just so wonderful. And I think
yeah,
that he really loved, that as well. I think a lot of people do, a lot of, kind of, yeah. So to be surrounded by him was wonderful, but to just, to have some break
yeah.
is
And
also needed.
yeah, and I mean, breathing is so good. It's certainly one of my favorite things to do, along with food as well. The
Yeah.
you were mentioning about pho. There's this place in Mississauga that it's just local, right? It's just local to where I am,
Mm,
and the they give these large bowls. It's probably around this big, actually. Around so for
mm.
those of you who are watching the YouTube version, like around the size of this, where my hands are right now,
Oh.
and it's not flat, but it's not a tall bowl, but it's big.
Oh, I know
And
you.
oh man, I mean, big portions, affordable prices, and you are full for the night. It is,
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Same thing with Warsaw. I mean, back now it's less. Now it's actually getting quite expensive. Warsaw, it's starting to get expensive. I mean, it already is kind of, but especially compared to the Canadian dollar, because the Canadian dollar is so not very good. But yeah, those fuzz actually really really good in Poland. I would say yeah, pho and Pizza Hut were the two things I had most when I was doing the competition. That's for sure.
that's a total opposite Pizza Hut.
Yeah, Pizza Hut because my parents were like, oh, it saves time, and also it's like safer, and because it's a chain, but at the same time, it's not as trashy as McDonald's or KFC, which is just right around the corner from. Actually, yeah, so all the competitors stay at the Novotel, so right across from the street is where the a little street plus a little bit of walking is where KFC and Pizza Hut are, and KFC is on the upper level and Pizza Hut's on the lower level.
I love how you remember all these places so particularly.
Yeah, I
That's
have very good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a very. I mean, it was such a memorable month. I mean, I do go visit quite a lot. I mean, I was in Warsaw and Poland like 3 times over the past 2.5 months. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Fair enough. Fair
yeah.
enough. I remember. I remember. I mean, you're mentioning McDonald's. I mean, William Yang. He went on record saying that he's probably responsible for half of Poland's McDonald's income for
Oh
the entirety of
wow.
the competition because that was pretty much all he ate for the entirety of the competition, right? For the same reason too. Just you didn't want to have an upset stomach before you go on stage or even the
Yeah.
day before, right? So no, I totally get the. I mean, even pizza for me. I mean, back in the day, if I was performing, I mean, even pizza was a little bit kind of iffy for me because of the
Mm.
cheese. What if the cheese is not fresh, right? Because
Well, yeah,
and
that's true.
dairy products, if they're not fresh, can play wild tricks on your body for in
Yeah.
the weirdest ways and the worst times too. So for me, it's more like the soups and anything that's like hot food, like cooked hot with soups. Like for me, pho would actually be the safe bet because of the fact that
No, the boiling soup.
exactly
The boiling soup.
any
Yeah, I
viruses
mean,
are
yeah,
killed. Yeah,
yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah, so
yeah, yeah. Did you get a chance to visit Zelazowa Wola?
yeah, I've played there 3 times now. Yeah, I've played there 3 times. But my first ever visit was during the preliminary. I went together a bit with Victoria. We went together. That was both of our first visits. So that was April 2015. But then since then I've played there 3 times. The most recent time being actually this past June. Yeah.
Nice. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. Yeah, I think I
Yeah, it
remember
was
even seeing the. I think there was live. I think it was live streamed. Did your recent performance or?
the recent one, no. The past two that I did before, yes, there was. But the recent one, no. They've been cutting down a little bit on their budget, so they only stream once a month now. But that was a very interesting trip for me because actually the day after I was asked to you know how this year there's the Bechstein in the competition, right?
Yes.
So I was asked to be part of the little pianist team that was trying out the Bechstein at the Philharmonic to see whether or not I would be included in the competition. So yeah, I was actually doing that together with Krzysztof and another pianist. I don't know if you know him, but he was a wonderful finalist of 2010, Pavel Bakaretsy.
Yeah, I've heard of him before. I've heard of him. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was the same trip.
Nice. 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 Nice.
Yeah,
And to sum up your time at Warsaw, what were the most important lessons that you learned from that competition?
I think the biggest thing that I really look up to of myself back then is the ability to just focus and zone in without any other outside distractions. I mean, nowadays it's also just so difficult, and also, I mean, nowadays because there's so I think in some ways this is so true that ignorance is bliss. Now I feel like I know so much of how the competition is running. I know that I'm friends with some of the jury members and etc. And you know sometimes you think a bit too much. And I think the thing of back then was, of course, I was thinking a lot, but in some ways, but I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily blame myself, but it was just easier to focus back then, and to focus not on multitasking, but on just one thing, on one thing. And that's something that, looking back retrospectively, I try to, remind myself that as long as you just do your best, you may not succeed now, you may not succeed 2 months from now, but sometime in the future you probably will. And so that's just to really focus on yourself. And that's actually really what I did, in Warsaw. I was really, I didn't expect I would go so far. So I was really just trying to play the best I could. I was trying to feel the mazurkas as much as I could. I was trying to feel the polonaise as much as I could. I was trying to, and there was not really, not that I necessarily, actively put my brain out there and be like, thinking of like a billion other things that are totally unrelated. But, I think also now that, with age, and of course I've heard more recordings, sometimes it's very difficult to block out the noise, or, these kind of subconscious voices that are like, oh, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. So back then I didn't really have as much noise, let's say. And so now, I try to remember what it was like back then sometimes, when I approach music, or just when in general, when I approach things in life, to not be impatient. So to, but to really just, do your best, and to not really, it's so cliche to do your best and not to think about anything else. But in many ways, it's, the explanation behind it is much deeper. Yeah. But to really eliminate as much noise as you can. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just described life for everyone.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
true though. It's very,
because
very true. It's just, it's so difficult.
it is.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like for my experience, when you were talking about overthinking, I think you just described every single lawyer out there, including myself. We overthink everything. And just and unfortunately, in our jobs, we have to, right? Because we have to
Yeah.
consider every single possible outcome, and even the impossible outcomes, because who knows? Maybe even the impossible could happen, right? I know it's
Yeah.
happened to me a couple of times too, in my own in the work that I do. It's happened to everyone in the legal profession, where you have a case that you think you have every single argument down, but then when you go up in front of court, especially if you're in litigation, and then they ask you a question that luckily you're prepared for already, because you've overthought to that point. But even then, it's like, oh man, really? Like, now I have to go down this line of thinking that I prepared somewhat, but not the same as preparing for all these other potentialities.
Mm.
So I think you just described so much, in the sense that back in the day when you're younger, when you don't have as much knowledge into something, things appear a lot more magical. I can even say from also my own hobby as a sports announcer. I still, don't get me wrong, I still love doing it now, and I'm probably going to do it as a hobby alongside my other hobbies until the day I die, of course. But when I was younger, I didn't know anything about what goes into a production. Over the years, as I get through the experience, I'm thinking, oh wow, like it's great that I know about it and it's fascinating, but that magic is gone now, right? Because now you know how you know how the soup is made, you know how the food is cooked, so to speak, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And
For sure. But
and
at this, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Please continue.
sorry. So I think it's not just sports announcing too. Like even even in law. Law, it was different in the sense that it wasn't really it was never really magical for me. It was more just like, oh, this is an interesting area, right? But certainly after, as I get more experience being in the profession, I realized, okay, yeah, now I know how the food's being cooked, for so to speak. But it's also like, well, now that's sort of that any sort of mystery is gone now, because it's you're a part of the now I'm a part of the system, and now I'm one of the lawyers right now at this point, right? And you have a different perspective just by virtue of being in that area. So no, I totally get it. I think anybody watching this, especially the older people, older generations, having even more life experience than we do, probably will relate to this, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, because the thing also with music is that I think, or just in life, you always want to have things be as fresh as possible, right? And in a way, we're always looking to recreate that magic. And in order to recreate that magic, we have to discover different dimensions. We have to look deeper. We have to look more, even zoom in more. But with each discovery, the more you know. And then the next time you do it again, the more considerations you have to take in. And by the time you're, like having discovered like thousands of different dimensions or, things that you have to think about that were once fresh to you, but not fresh anymore. And you're still looking for that new thing. It's like you're trying to search for that new thing, but yet now you have to like control like 1,000 different variables. So that really makes your brain really like just fried. Whereas, of course, when you're young, you're like, oh, this is like, I'm even trying this. This is so new. And like, you don't have to think so much. And I mean, not saying that we have to even think, but it's just subconscious. I guess it's just, yeah, it's just human life. We try to have a we start off with a very, very pure brain. We start off with simplicity and then we explore and then we come back to simplicity in the end. But then, of course, the simplicity in the end is not very, how we get there, how one gets there is not very, very simple at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That it's also why I think it also comes back to, even with the growing prominence of, well, music competitions in general, but Chopin is very much a good example of this. The growing aspect of it, I think, has to do with the fact that there's still new ways of looking at Chopin's music and even just performances. I mean, especially with the pandemic at the time, which was, well, I mean, I can't believe 2020 was already 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, can you believe it?
It's the I think with for many people around the world, it was traumatic. Even it wasn't just an annoyance; it was actually traumatic. People lost people; they lost family members to that. They lost friends to the pandemic. Right. I think with that sort of experience and with life changing so drastically for many people, when they come across something like the Chopin competition, whether they are new listeners or they are seasoned musicians who know about the music so well, I think that experience alone single-handedly informed them and gave them a new perspective on Chopin and also on how the performances are. And I think part of it has to do with how the high caliber of all the performances, but I think more than that is just even listening. They don't even necessarily have to know about Chopin's history yet or even his story, but just listening, I think through that alone made them feel a way and made them relate in a way that I don't think they would have come across at any point in their lives at that point. So that's why I think competitions like this have that allure. No matter who wins, what prize, and who plays what phrase better at that competition or whatever, or using whatever edition, the Polish national edition, or any of that, or Paderewski or whatnot. I think just listening, just being exposed, hit them. I literally showed the competition to even a couple of friends of mine who had no experience in this area, and to them it just hit them so differently because they're in a different stage of life. I mean, a bunch of my friends, some of them I met back in university. It's just a different chapter as opposed to now. Yeah. Now they're starting families. Some of them, right? They're about to get into the next stage of their relationships or whatnot, right? So different chapter altogether. But now when they listen to it, it's just different. It's just so different. Yeah. It hits such in a different way, and they're not even musically trained. They have no musical training whatsoever, but they're just like, wow, I'm so glad you showed me this and I want more. I want to see more, and I want to bring my partner along as well to hear or see this because this is such a different world and it's so fascinating. I think a new leaf, a new chapter has really just been stumbled across, a blessing in disguise as a result of the pandemic in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you.
So just briefly going through this because I want to get to the really good stuff after with the more with musicality and whatnot. You also had a time competing at the Van Cliburn as well, and also many years before that in your junior in your junior days, you played at the Bachauer competition. What were those experiences like, and how do they compare and contrast to the Chopin competition?
I mean, it's so different from Chopin competition just because there's so much more repertoire you have to think about. I think when you play at the Chopin competition, you're thinking in a very specialist kind of way. Yeah, it's a very, very, it's a totally different breed. I would say that I was going to give an analogy, but I don't think it's a very, very good analogy. But I'll say it anyways. If Chopin competition was like figure skating, all the Chopin competitions, the other competitions for me. I mean, of course, I don't want to say that it's about playing for the fastest, but it would be like speed skating. It's just a completely different. It's like the same thing, but completely different worlds. Yeah, so of course when you play for of course when you play at the Chopin competition, you think about programming. You do think about programming, but it's in such a different way than the Van Cliburn, where you have to create three different programs from scratch, and you have also commission work, which is also you just approach it so differently. You don't. Whereas there's so much tradition behind Chopin, and Chopin for sure. Chopin is the most scrutinized composer in terms of interpretation by far out of any composer, probably because of this competition, and also just how easily accessible his music is. And yeah, even just the whole attitude is just different. Yeah, I don't know how else to put it. Yeah, so it just is it more intense? It's something like the Cliburn more intense than the Chopin? Maybe in terms of quantity, yes. But in terms of, I don't want to say quality, but in terms of the amount of scrutiny that goes through interpretation, oh, definitely not as intense as the Chopin, you know. Whereas, like let's say you can play Beethoven 101 or something, and you can do it here with a bit more like space, and people will just say, okay, that was a great performance of 101. But in Chopin competition, you have the audience go, oh my God, that one note he brought out a bit more. Oh my God, this is the end of, this is either the end or the start of the world. And yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I mean I see it, and that's the reason why when it comes to the International Chopin Competition, I just close the chat completely because
Yeah.
it's one note off. Oh, we played it all. It's wrong.
But honestly, it's also how people unfortunately listen. Even I must say, even like you know, jury members or something. I mean, people don't say this, but it's they react. One small little change in Chopin, people react stronger to than one small little change in even Bach.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I see it. I mean, it's online, even on the chats. I close it completely because it's like, oh, guys, come on. It's just one note, right? It's one note. I mean, if that person completely stopped and had to restart the program, okay, yeah, that definitely
Yeah.
that's a huge deal. But
Yeah, but yeah.
it's
Yeah,
like,
not even in terms of mistakes, but even in terms of like musical decisions. Even in terms of musical decisions, the smallest, I don't know, like people are you know whether it's good or bad, but whereas for I don't know, it's more level-headed. I feel like when you do other competitions, it feels a bit more sobering, the experience of doing show. It's so easy to get zoomed in. It's so easy to lose perspective, to be honest, of the music actually. um yeah, and it's so easy to get so zoomed in and to like just be in your tunnel. But in other competitions, because you have to play a Mozart concerto and then you have to play another concerto and you have to do this and you have to do that. Yeah, it's much more kind of, in a sense, it's a lot of It's very intense in terms of what you have to, the amount you have to prepare. But then, yeah, that's I would say more room to breathe. Also, to play to play a little bit of Chopin maybe, and then to play some Bach and to play some Prokofiev. Yeah, for me,
Yeah.
that's actually much more liberating. Yeah.
Yeah, it is because you're not just focused on one composer. People can kind of, I mean, people can kind of divert their attention to different composers based on
Yeah.
on the program and in a way it's also a sign of how passionate people are about the music, but it can also get very unhealthy to the
Oh,
extent
super.
where people get so fixated on one edition of the competition. And my reaction to that is, look, at the end of the day, it's a competition. You may not always necessarily agree with the final decisions on who won, who lost, whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's not the be all and end all of a person's career, right? There's just so many ways, and frankly, even especially in music, there are
Um,
so many ways to success in a music career. It's not just necessary. Now, I get it. Piano has the issue of, well, you have to win this competition to get your name across into the mainstream of the world coverage and whatnot, right? I get that, right? But there's still other ways to have success in this kind of career that so yeah, you didn't win the first prize at the International Chopin Competition. Yeah, you didn't win the first prize at Van Cliburn or whatever major competition that is there. But that's not the end of the world, right? It's not the end of the world. There's still going to be a future that comes afterwards, right? It's not like sports. And even
oh,
then,
for
for
sure.
sports, I mean, you lose one game. Is this going to determine your entire season? I mean, if LeBron James lost his first game of the season this in 2025, 2026, do you think it's going to be the end of his career? No, it's not. He's still going to have
Yeah.
another how many games? Like 80 something games or however many games that there are still remaining for with his team. And I mean, you win some, you lose some in sports, right? Even in sports, it's like, oh, and I see it. People get so fixated over, oh, he's playing this, oh, and down to even what they're doing in personal life. It's like, dude, I mean, come on. I mean, you can't expect them to be perfect. They're not deities. They're not gods, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but yeah, for sure. And then it's just yeah, I think it's also this whole perspective thing. Whereas I think when you when in normal competitions, it feels like that people are kind of more, at least the public. I think the juries still are, usually, because they're so professional. They of course, I'm not really talking about them, but in general, I feel like the public when they listen to kind of normal competitions, it's kind of a more, I guess, well-rounded approach. Whereas, when you listen to Chopin, it's kind of like, oh, it's like, I don't know. People sometimes they get so zoomed into the little details that they kind of forget about, like, oh, or because they're so familiar with these pieces, they might like something that Zimmerman does, or that he brings out this voicing, and then if someone else doesn't bring it out, then they might just be like, oh, this interpretation is not valid, and they forget to zoom out and think about actually what the music was about, and think about from a more global perspective. Whereas maybe because it's less easy to scrutinize or to understand Beethoven 101, it wouldn't be than if it's like if it's convincing, or if you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
sometimes
So
you just have to let the music be for what it is organically, right? You have to
yeah,
let that come
absolutely.
across. And
Yeah.
that's essentially what I had even from Eric Holloway, from one of my earlier guests. He's an octavist, so basically he sings at a range that is one octave lower than standard bass.
Wow.
But he didn't actually have any formal music training until
Mm.
he was 25.
Mm.
So he sang just naturally, and then afterwards he was discovered by two music professors in voice, and they
Mm.
were shocked that he didn't have a single lesson up until that point. But
Mm.
for in his experience, he said, as much as I mean, I don't, I'm paraphrasing here, as much as he would have liked to have more experience in formal voice training earlier on, he if he did, he probably would have had a very different outlook on music as a whole because he's so fixated on these different things, right? Which is
Mm.
it's kind of a problem that you and I sort of face being having learned piano from such a young age and going through all these
Mm.
teachers and doing and learning all these different lessons and trying to go through all that and through all these different teachers and whatnot. But it's that sort of organicness to that I think is somehow lost from being too focused on the structure and the method. Whereas what happened to actually just playing the music for what it is and from how you feel, right? And
For sure.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and this is why I always ask this question to everybody, and I'm about to ask you this question too. What is musicality to you?
What is musicality for me? Yeah, I don't know. Being not too controlling. Yeah, I don't know. I just think that music is greater than us. It truly is. And what we can do is we can be a part of the music, but not to have the music as a means to, you know, prove yourself or as something that is under your control. You know, music flows. Music will come by regardless of whether or not you like it. I like to look at it. Just I think a lot of things in life is water. You know, you cannot. Maybe you can stop it. You know, maybe you can have an artificial barrier, but you cannot stop it from flowing. You cannot stop wind from flowing. You cannot stop the earth from spinning. And I think that the music has this too. You know, you just I think being too overly controlling and to be too overly perfectionist, you know, perhaps is not really my cup of tea when it comes to musicality. I really believe that music, yeah, just being sincere, you know, doing just what feels right. But of course, being convinced, and of course, we have the score as well. But to your own moral judgment, whatever feels the best and feels the most natural, yeah, just be free. Be free. Yeah.
Yeah, great way to put it. Great way to put it. And I think our entire conversation has kind of sort of answered that, been a long way of answering that ultimate question. What is musicality
Mm,
to you? Right. I mean, and
mm,
it comes down to one of the issues that exists with competitions, and I want to be clear, I'm not bashing competitions. I think they're important in a
mm,
different way as well, and they're important for bringing. I mean, like your career was brought up mostly by the competitions that you performed in as well, along with your other performances as
mm,
well, right? So I want
mm.
to be clear.
Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
bashing competitions, but one issue that unfortunately naturally came out of that is that it became sort of the way of do you define musicality to a specific standard, right?
Mm, yeah, for
And
sure.
what happens is that runs into potential problems where you have people who genuinely have a different approach to performing music, to performing that repertoire. But in more traditionalist competitions, that is considered problematic and they can't move on, right?
Mm.
So, I mean, there's a common question right now. It's more of if Chopin were to compete at his own competition, he wouldn't even make it past the first or second round, right?
Oh, probably not. No.
But it's not just because the pianos are different, but it's that over time, our knowledge of the piano, our knowledge of pianism, our knowledge of performance has grown and evolved over the past 2 centuries
Mm,
alone. So to say, oh, this is objectively how you play this piece, it's
mm,
impossible. It's frankly impossible. For some composers like Chopin, it's debatable if we even have an word text for that. I mean, Janina
mm,
herself has actually told me it's impossible to have an word text for Chopin because of just
mm.
even the original versions, the original manuscripts
Right.
were different versions. And
Yeah.
Chopin has done that before. So even without that, we cannot possibly say that there is an objective way of approaching something. There's many subjective ways, right? And we can agree with
Mm,
someone, disagree with others, and we can agree that okay, yeah, that's doesn't sound very
mm,
very good, right? But to
mm-hmm.
say that something is 100% objective, that's where we run into issues at that point. That being said, we can still objectively say that music sounds good. what's considered
Yes, for
sounds
sure.
good. I mean, I'm starting to get into Immanuel Kant at this point,
Nah,
or that sort of thing,
I mean,
right?
it is so philosophical. I mean, what
Yeah,
is musicality to you? That is a very, very philosophical question. Yeah, but I just think, yeah, just being natural, being free, and not, not thinking too much. Of course, you have to think, and you have to. I mean, you can think about it, you can analyze it, but then at the end of the day, is music. I think is something that is so human,
hmm
and that is even more human than words or anything else. And so sometimes it just, yeah, I'm really kind of a feelings guy, maybe. I do think that feelings, having a feel for certain things is so important. But of course, you develop this as well, and you can hone it and you can nurture it. But then I think, yeah, just being honest, yeah, being anything that you would want to be as a good human, in treating music as a human in that way, being willing to learn more about it, being empathetic to music, being empathetic to the composers. They didn't have all the ink in the world, so if they wrote a slur here, okay, they must have meant a message. What the message is, yeah, who knows? But at least something is different between a slur versus a dot. Whether or not however, but just being empathetic. Just how you would treat a really good friend. I would. That's kind of for me like good musicality.
yeah, and that's a great way of putting it as well. And I think even just going down to what we were just talking about, even who the composers are to us are different depending on the
No,
person, right? I mean,
for sure.
who Chopin is to you is different from who Chopin is to me, and
Yeah.
who Chopin is to Victoria or to Kate or to Eric or to anybody out there. We may have similarities, but at some point there will be that difference.
Oh, for
And
sure.
I think that it's very easy to, especially with competitions, to forget that important fact about each person because we're so focused on every single note and phrase and trill and tremolo and whatnot and ostinato and whatnot, right? But
Mm,
that's why I think it's important to have perspective and be able to
yeah.
understand that part, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, who you are to me is very different than who you are. Maybe even to me 2 hours ago. So it's just life. Yeah.
Exactly. So, in your experiences, what are the greatest misconceptions that you have personally seen about piano and really about classical music as a whole?
Now, these are the questions that require a bit more, head spinning. Uh, Misconceptions. How about how about let's turn the spotlight a bit. I'm actually very curious what your answer is, and then I will build on top of it.
So, the way how I found with people here in Canada, having lived
Mm,
my entire life in Canada, is that first of all, I'll say this, and I've said it before in previous episodes as well to some extent, but I'll say it again here. Canada is very much a sports focused country, very
mm,
much so. If you were to ask the majority of Canadians here, one of the first sports, probably the first sport that they come to mind, is hockey. Sports define almost everything that many Canadians here
yeah.
actually associate and socialize with each other. Music is very much a minority in the experience here in Canada. What
Mm,
you experience at Taylor, for example, I didn't even experience that as a musician. I was very much on my own with
mm,
only my mom as my first piano teacher, and my second piano teacher. His name is Wang Yang. He also went to the New England Conservatory as well
mm,
a number of years ago. But it was also a very very different experience. And I would even say that your experience and Victoria's experience, and really anybody's experience at Taylor Academy, is actually also the minority within the minority as well. So a great misconception is that because of so few people have that connection to music, especially classical music for that matter, they think of it as elitist. They think of it as this different world for these uber rich, uber snobby people, right? You know,
Oh,
and I mentioned this before. When I was actually in middle school, even I was actually bullied for being a pianist
oh,
because,
no way.
yeah, I was bullied for that because people thought I had no life. I was just sitting at home practicing, practicing,
Mm,
practicing, practicing. But here's the thing: you wouldn't say that about a hockey player. You wouldn't say that about a kid who went through hockey, going through all these different practices and being around in with your coach and with your team, right? You wouldn't say that about a hockey player. You wouldn't say that about a basketball player. You wouldn't say that about any sports pursuit here in Canada, at least.
mm,
But in music, at least in my experience, it was that.
mm,
It was actually quite difficult for me growing up in many ways.
mm,
This is not the only one, but this was a big reason why. It was because there was these misconceptions of classical music being something that's just too it's completely out of their social experience. They would not even think of that. It's still sort of an issue now in some circles, even that I talk with. It's changed a little bit, but I would honestly say in my experience in the 2000s, it was very, very strange. It was strange. And because of that, I think in Canada at least, and I mentioned this actually on Yanina's episode, your achievements, sadly, not many Canadians know about that. There just aren't that many. And part of
oh,
the reason
absolutely.
why I want to have this podcast and also have the show is to bring more awareness to this area, along with the work that goes into it and how much thinking, how much development, how much practice goes into it. Because when you really think about it, it's actually so similar to sports. And I'm drawing from both my experience as a classical pianist and as a sports announcer in this kind of conversation because I've seen both worlds to a very large extent. I've been a pianist for almost my entire life since I was 3 years old. I've been a sports announcer for over 10 years at this point. So seeing the amount of work that goes into shooting a basketball into a hoop, spiking a
Mm,
ball down across the net past a defender, shooting a ball into a net, shooting a puck into a net, scoring a try, scoring a touchdown, all these different sports, the amount of time and energy and mentality spent into that is just the same amount. It's the same thing in music. But unfortunately, most Canadians still don't know that.
yeah.
And that's where the misconceptions come from, at least in my own experience.
Yeah. I don't know if it's even just Canada, but yeah, in general. I mean, yeah, I would say probably the same thing. Yeah, yeah, that is, I definitely agree. That is one of the misconceptions of classical music, but not even on a, I guess, social, you know, economic point of view, which is actually, as we know, is actually totally not the case. Classical musicians are really not paid well at all. But even from like an intellectual point of view, I think a lot of people they demonize classical music because it's so intellectual. It's for the smart, or it's like it's so, or people who think that people do classical music think that maybe people classical musicians think that they're better than the others because they even they know how to listen better or like they blah, blah, blah. I think that's one of the great misconceptions of classical music is that it's very intellectual and that it's only intellectual. Of course, it is very intellectual, as we know. I will not deny that, but actually, a greater part of it is that in a way, it is the musical genre that can, not easily can, but it has the ability to allow us to feel the most out of any genre. A lot of people I know they go to rap or they go to pop, and the voices are great, the beats are great, but at least from my, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but at least from my point of view, a lot of people go to those forms of music for a good time and also to numb themselves, you know, to get drowned out. Whereas classical music is kind of like the complete opposite. It's you know, head on, face on, front on confrontation with your own feelings. And I think that that is really, I wish that this would be emphasized more, because at the point, I think a lot of people just think classical music is just intellect and nothing else, you know? And yeah, I think for me, that is the saddest misconception. Of course, to feel all these, to tap into all your emotions, even when you're sitting in silence, it's hard. You know, people, they don't want to. Sometimes people, you know, they don't want to, you know, think about troubles that they've had, or they don't want to tap into certain emotions. It's just easier just to get numbed, you know, and just to. But then, yeah, so in that sense, already classical is difficult to relate to. But then, yeah, I just think that but yeah, I think maybe that's also has to do with also my philosophy of you know, approaching classical music. You know, I guess I said a little earlier, you know, I'm kind of like a few more feelings and instincts kind of guy, and yeah, I mean, of course, I appreciate all the academics of classical music, but I think when music is over intellectualized with not much of the other side, yeah, I think that it just yeah, it proves more the point that classical music is inaccessible. Whereas, yeah, I guess you know, I wish we would focus a bit more on kind of the emotional aspect, and of course, using all the intellect we can, or all the things that we know from the score, to emphasize these more human, you know, this deeper human connection. Yeah, for me, that's probably the biggest thing. Is that yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you're mentioning about even just from the instinctual part and the feelings part, I mean, a couple points. First of all, that sounds a lot like how Goku approaches his martial arts training style in Dragon Ball, basically, and how he does that. So, right, right. And second
Oh.
of all, you said it so well about the numbing.
Mm,
That's something that I've noticed too for people in Canada and the U.S. in particular. But really, you see this around the world too. But speaking from the Canadian perspective, I really see it. I saw it even back in my university days too.
mm,
For for many people, you said it so well when they're just not able to sit in their own silence. It's one of the reasons why phones are so ubiquitous and so people always turn on their phones more often than ever before, and it's
mm,
causing real psychological issues in people around the world. People, I think one issue from a social perspective is that we're taught, I mean, in Canada, we're taught to feel emotions, but we're not taught on how to regulate them. Because, and I see this in university, and I saw this even to a certain extent in law school, where if you want to regulate emotions, it's mostly focused on doing it from a materialistic way. Buy
mm.
this, buy that, do that, do this particular activity, buy into this, get the subscription, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Even for music, I mean, people, I mean, nowadays Spotify is a way that people listen to their music, but you have to pay a subscription if you want to get some of the more premium features in Spotify, but
Mm,
YouTube as well, right? If you want
mm,
specific experiences, you want that, right? But again, you're buying into a subscription. You're paying something materialistic for something also materialistic to solve your own
mm.
emotional troubles. When it comes to that, then music is treated almost as
Numbing agent.
a numbing agent. It's almost like a It's almost like a drug, almost basically. It's not treated
Yeah,
as
kind of. Yes,
it's like demoted to
totally.
that extent. So I think a big part of that, and I saw it because many people they come from they come from lifestyles that are very vastly different from our own lifestyles, and they struggle to cope with that even earlier
Mm,
on, and because they never actually had that ability to develop that past even into their adulthood, it still sticks with them. But
yeah,
it's at a point where now they can't even recognize that as an issue, where
yeah,
where they still think it's something else, but really it's actually an even deeper problem that's within. And I realized that even speaking with some of my older guests that I've spoken with on the podcast, they were born and raised and grew up and lived in a time where we didn't have all these different technological advances or so-called technological advances. I even argue they're actually advanced, right?
yeah.
Like I mean, AI without I mean artificial generated intelligence. That's an example of I don't think that's actually a step backwards, but that's a different
Mm,
story altogether, right? But even phones, for example, or smartphones, I should say in particular. But
mm,
I found from the older generations experiences. Now, of course, like I get it. They live in a much more prosperous time than we do, right? I
yeah,
mean, economic growth was unbelievable back in those days, right? So that part, I'm not talking about that. But what I am
yeah,
talking about is how they're able to relate to the social community overall,
yeah.
right? That part is a lesson that I think everybody, no matter when they are born,
Mm,
even 100 years, 1,000 years into the future, this is something that cannot change in human society. There are
yeah,
four things that we need: food, water, shelter, community. If you take out community, we have the problems that we face today, where from a social standpoint, we're so individualistic, especially in the Western world, so individualistic to the extent where, oh, this person you're disagreeing with, oh, leave this person behind and there's somebody better out there from a friendship standpoint. But you can't just be constantly doing that. Eventually you have nobody to
yeah.
talk with, right?
Exactly.
It's
Yeah,
and music challenges people to think in a much more communal way. Music
yeah,
is designed to be shared, not to be withheld.
yeah,
So when you have classical music that challenges that sort of mindset of numbing yourself, when you have classical music that doesn't do that, that actually is the opposite of that,
yeah.
people feel uncomfortable. People feel
Absolutely.
that people who aren't ready feel uncomfortable, but people who are ready
Hmm,
feel great.
hmm.
And I saw that, like I said earlier in the Chopin competition, I saw that in the reactions to it. Those are people who are ready for that. They're thinking, "Oh wow," and they explain so much what they're thinking. But for those who aren't ready for it, they don't
Yeah,
even want to listen
yeah.
because they're just not in that shape. They're not even close to being in that shape. They've fallen so far off down that path that they can't even begin to comprehend that. They don't have that capacity anymore.
Or not even that, but I think they just don't even know that classical music is about that, or that classical music is can be because it's rarely framed in such a light. I think, because classical music, people just see it in popular culture, or just people in general in society, it's framed as something that's ultra intellectual, and that's just difficult to understand. But if it were maybe in the sense PR or branded better, and as like the opposite of numbing, and that it's actually something that is so, I guess, so deeply connected to, yeah, what we talked about. I think people, I don't even think it's not ready to, but they just don't even know that it's a thing. I think, and that's
Exactly.
for up to us to help change. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're mentioning about how we should have better PR for music, and that's sort of something that I've been doing also on my show here. I mean, I use this example quite often, but a good example, just using something as simple as the tritone interval. Tritone interval is, well, I mean, it's an augmented fourth, diminished fifth, but this isn't just heard in classical music. You hear it in Metallica. You hear it in
oh
Master of
yeah,
Puppets, right?
for sure, yeah.
You hear it in Back to the Future. right? Every most Canadians and most Americans know that movie, even to this day. Plenty of tritones across the soundtrack, especially in the climax of the actual movie. You hear it in Smash Bros. Ultimate. You hear it in Smash Bros. Melee. You hear it in all these different franchises. You hear it in Doom Eternal. All these different franchises that are completely unrelated to classical music, yet have that musical standpoint there. Just a simple interval, but can convey so much tension, chaos, uncertainty in just less than a second. See, that's where the beauty of music is. And that's not just classical music. Again, that's so many different genres. When you listen to little details like that, and you don't have to be overly intellectual about that, it's already there. It's right in front of you, in front of your ears as well. You have that. That informs so much of the experience. And that's, I think, a one way of many different ways to disprove a lot of the misconceptions and attitudes towards classical music. And I think if we continue to do more of that, like this is just very, very preliminary, but if we do more of that, I think then more people are like, okay, this is framed differently.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Agree.
Looking back at your career so far, what are the most rewarding things about your career and the most important lessons that you've learned?
The rewarding things and the things I've learned. Things I've learned. I mean, I've learned so much, so I'm just trying to say what's the thing I've learned? Probably, let's have maybe just a general life lesson, I guess. But maybe I kind of believe in destiny. I believe in destiny. Yeah, in that sense. I mean, in the sense that, yeah, there's a time and there's a place for everything. And so don't rush things. Be patient and just do your best. And you never know what's around the corner. And the best and the worst things in your career and in life will be those that are unexpected. And yeah, that's probably what I've been reminded of time in and time out, all over my career so far. And yeah, in that sense, I just go with the flow now. So yeah, and also in terms of music, there's sometimes when you're just practicing and you're like, or when you like in a certain point of life, you just might not feel this music. So why force yourself? Why? There's like if you're not feeling Schumann Carnival today, you can play it, in like 2 months. You can play something else that you feel more deeply connected to right now. So I just think, just try to force yourself less in that way. Of course, search for excellence, but then of course try to, align your excellence with what you're feeling. And I think that's always the best. It's like, try to play your strong cards at the moment. Don't always, of course you have to challenge yourself, but then at the same time, you have to be, life is only so short. So just, just dig in deeper into what you're feeling at the moment, and then there'll be a moment for something else. And if it just doesn't come, then it's okay, because, even the greatest pianists, the greatest people they're not doing everything, so so that's something I've learned. The most rewarding parts, honestly, the small things, meeting people, having great candid conversations like this, playing for different audiences, playing in prisons, which I do very often. Playing for all kinds of people. It's just I think the variety of this, the diversity and variety of this career, but also what I really actively search for in my career is something that I think has been really rewarding. I wouldn't want to have apple every day, but I like dragon fruit some days, and I like strawberries other days. Yeah, I mean, next week I'm going to Nigeria and Ghana. I'm going to be both a groomsman at a friend's wedding, but also I will play a couple of my own concerts there as well. And of course, it's a totally different experiences. And this for me is just so rewarding. And then the next week I'm in Asia, and then I have some other things there, and then and then I'm back in Germany, and then it's a totally different program, and and all these things added together are just so rewarding. And yeah, sometimes even the small thing, the smallest things, and of course, sometimes I think when you have just these small sparks with music, when you have these small quote unquote breakthroughs in your feelings with this music or your relationship with this music, oh, that is so rewarding when you finally figure out what to do with X fermata in the Polonaise Fantasy, and you feel it this time. Oh, that is so rewarding.
And as we begin to close this episode, what is your advice to those who want to pursue a career in classical music? And what would you like to say to your fans?
Advice for pursuing classical music. On a more general scale, I think it's important to be exposed a lot to not only different performances, not only different repertoire, but just different creative forms, really. I think being a specialist is really overrated. I think a lot of the greats that have come before us, they're really generalists, and they take interest in many, 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 many different things in life. And I think that's where you can find your inspiration. And of course, try to force yourself as little as possible. Try to find reasons to like something and to be empathetic in that way. And then, what you have to do afterwards will not feel as forced. I think that's really important as well. On a more practical level, I think, really learning a lot of repertoire as young as you can is super important. And a lot of music is related, and honestly a lot of great music is also taken. A lot of these composers, they were inspired by other things as well, and to just play kind of a lot of different repertoire, you can sometimes see many correlations between different pieces, and that's always very, very interesting. I think technique is, of course, super, super important to develop at a young age. So always challenge yourself there. And then I think also another thing, pulse. And I think a lot of times people kind of, think about rubato, but of course, we, maybe this is also a bit more into my own philosophy of music making, but, I think, at least, kind of being natural in a way, but also, relating to physics and to, all that kind of stuff. But in general, pulse is important, and harmonies, just, I think I also, personally, I take a lot of inspiration also from jazz musicians, and I love how, when they just play a seventh, their eyes are like this, their eyes glow up. And I wish that sometimes classical musicians, we had a bit more of that kind of joy whenever there's some harmony. And it's like, wow. And then you actually play it differently rather than play it flat, Yeah. So that's kind of my advice. I try to be as detailed this time and as less cliche and less BS as possible today. Did I cover both aspects of
Yeah,
the
I think
question?
also what we'd like to say to your fans also as well.
Oh, what would I like to say to my fans? I just wish you all a happy day. What can I say? Thank you for not only for, of course, supporting me, but also supporting what gives so many of us life and enjoyment, and for keeping classical music alive and fresh, and for having your own opinions, and for not being afraid to express your own opinions, and for I really wish everyone just a lot of fulfillment and happiness and joy and sincerity in their lives.
Great words to end on. And I should also say that your experience about having that wide-eyed moment, well, for jazz musicians, I had that when I was listening to Kapustin the first time. So I was like, whoa, this is something different, something very, very different.
Yeah, it's so amazing when jazz musicians perform. Like it's like I don't know, that there's like a ninth here. There's a deceptive. There's a Neapolitan here. And they really react. They really react, and each chord sounds so different and so colorful. And then it's so just amazing musicality without it being forced. And sometimes I think I think in classical music, I think a lot of classical musicians, they also know that these harmonies exist, but they don't internalize it. They don't really, live it. They don't live it. I think that's the thing. You really have to live these kind of things. And I think jazz musicians, they do such a good job. And honestly, other genres as well, pop, people when they, I don't know, they really live this. They really live what they are hearing. Not only they really react to the moment.
Yeah, jazz is very much a very feeling kind of. It's very much based on feel a lot. I realize even improvisation is a huge part of jazz as well, right? So that a lot of that has to be based on feel. There's not.
Yeah, but even that, you can intellectualize it, and it makes sense. There's this, of course, logical sense to that feeling, right? And I just love it. I just love it when everything you do is connected to one another. Not that you just know that it's a fourth, but you also feel that it's a fourth, and that this fourth maybe compared to the third is a bit more,
Exactly.
but something, or a bit less even. Who knows? But at least it's different and it's not the same, and that you actually feel it rather than know that it's and can recite it, but you actually understand and
Exactly. And one thing that I think people will definitely feel good about your story and how what you've done over in your entire career so far.
Oh, who knows?
Tony, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you so very much for taking a lot of time out of your day, well, night, to share your experiences going to Warsaw, winning fifth prize at the International Chopin Competition, and everything that you've been doing outside afterwards as well. I think everybody's going to very much appreciate this perspective, this side of you that is very detailed into this part. And again, thank you so much for telling the living legend of Tony Yike Yang.
No. When I hear the living legend, I think I'm going to crack up every time. But thank you so much for having me. It's really been such a pleasure. And I'll be sleeping the whole day tomorrow, so on the plane, so it's okay. But no, really, I had such fun. And thanks for picking my brain, for picking my memories. And it's been such a great pleasure.
Yeah, and again, if I haven't said it, I'll say this as well. You're always welcome back on the show at any point in the future as well. So the door's always open for you to show up again, and looking forward to at some point in the future, hopefully talking again. This time more about other musical stuff, but not in the career sense, but would love to have you back on at some point in the future as well. You're always welcome.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to our audience for tuning into this episode of This is the Legend of. Again, this has been the episode. This has been the legend of Tony Yike Yang. You can follow him on Instagram at Tony Yike Yang. He also has his own website, www.tonyyikeyang.com. So if you want to follow up on his different performances, projects, and where he will be in the world, be sure to check him out there. Also, if you want to support us, be sure to support us on the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and click the bell notification icon so you'll always be notified whenever we upload. You can also follow us on our social media on Instagram, on LinkedIn, as well as following us on our audio-only platforms on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. So be sure to check those out as well if you want to stay tuned to future updates on This Is the Legend Of. Signing off for now, this is Amos Vang. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay legendary.